Final Fantasy XI contains some of the most memorable zone design of any MMO I've ever played, in no small part due to the art direction and music that breathe those zones to life. But while most of them will be forever burned into my memory, not each of those were particularly pleasant memories. Some areas seemed almost to be designed from the ground up to be frustrating, difficult, and mentally painful to be in, and those zones are what we'll be spending time on today. So hey guys, it's Hunt4Games, bringing you, as always, a healthy mix of videos on new releases and MMOs, and nostalgia trips to the classics that made us fall in love with games in the first place. And today's nostalgia trip is back to the original release of Final Fantasy XI, before the Zillart expansion even existed. Last video we walked down my top 5 favorites. Check that one out down in the description if you haven't already, but let's get right into it with the opposite end of the list. Please keep in mind as we go through this that at the end of the day, this is Final Fantasy XI, in its original glory no less. There are no bad zones in Final Fantasy XI. The art design in each is fantastic. These are just the ones that over the years have just irked me a little bit more for one reason or another. So let's get right into it. Like a well-crafted film, game design pulls together visuals and sound effects to help evoke a specific emotional response. While that's often positive, it doesn't have to be, and the feeling of unease, frustration, or just downright annoyance can be useful objectives as well, especially in a video game where additional tension is desired. But games have an additional tool at their disposal that films do not: roadblocks. Games can put actual physical hindrances that block progress, and tied with the two previous design techniques, well, it can just piss you off. I bring this all up to explain my pick number 5. Bedeau. Bedeau is a difficult zone. It's created in such a way that it can be difficult to run away or escape if necessary. Fairly thin routes make links common, and the dual elevation means you might have to take a roundabout path to get back up to the higher tier and down to the exit if you accidentally fall down. Meaning, once you're in, it's unlikely you're going to escape without killing if you get attacked. There's no music, so only rustling winds or the common sound of rain are there to keep you company, and the dry browns, reds, and muted greens just enhance the feeling that it's not a very inviting place to be. But if that wasn't enough to just make you not want to be there, we have the Afflictor and the Mute. The Afflictor blocks your path through the tunnels under Bedeau, which you're forced to go through if you want to make it to most of the areas on the map. Walk too close and you'll be stricken with Curse, reducing your overall MP, HP, and movement speed. It's one of the most painfully awful things that can happen to your character, and it lasts like 20 minutes if you don't just like curse enough, making you feel vulnerable and slow. And slow in a game like 11 where safety can turn to danger at a moment's notice and the game is just massively huge, slow can be a killer. There is of course a way to avoid this by using the Mute. Down a different hallway is the Mute device, and engaging with it will mute your character, allowing you to safely pass by the Afflictor without curse. But think about what this means though. The more positive option is to be silenced, meaning no spells, no casting Sneak and Invisible, no emergency warps, no avatars or cures, no Utsuzemi Ichi or Ni, nothing. As a magic using character, I'm a little biased, but more jobs would be affected by silence than wouldn't be in Final Fantasy XI. Silence just sucks. While it's not as debilitating as curse, it sort of feels like having your hands tied behind your back all the time. Now, yes, anyone who's ever been to the zone knows there's a simple workaround. You bring echo drops, you get muted, then you use them. But personally, this just taints the whole zone experience for me. Every time you move your way through the zone, you're dropping money on echo drops. You don't really want to explore because of this gated curse experience. It may not seem like a big deal, but it just kind of fills you with that like blech feeling, knowing that if you make a wrong turn or drop down and have to loop around again, you have to deal with this frustration. This is all leading up to the fact that Bedeau had some fairly difficult high-level mobs hiding deep within its depths, in tight corridors, behind doors, forcing you to take off invisible. I don't think any of this is accidental. This zone isn't awful because it's poorly made or ugly. It's just a well-crafted frustration inducer. And between that and awkwardly mispronouncing its name as Budix for years, I just didn't want to go. Which leads us to our slightly less frustrating terrible zone. Pick number 4, Mara. Now, Mara might surprise you, and in any other game it wouldn't be that terrible. It's not that large, it's a port for boat travel, but we have to understand Vana'diel as a whole. In the original game, there was only one zone that it could compare to, its sister zone, Selbina. As a Windurst native, I first made my way to Valkyrie Dunes by way of Baburu Peninsula and Mara, before boating to Selbina. Mara catches the Baburu art style well, with the salted rocky cliff look. It's a harsh landscape, and the small caves that are cut into the hillside evoke a difficult lifestyle for the locals. Again, this zone is perfectly crafted to instill a certain emotion, an idea about the backstory of the zone and its people. So why do I say it's one of the worst intro zones? I'll tell you why. Selbina. After taking that first boat ride, overnight I think, and arriving at Selbina, I felt like I had stepped off the boat into a glorious wonderland. The music of that zone is usually my top 5 lists. It was my ringtone at one point. It's just a gorgeous little beach setting with fishermen everywhere and adventurers stepping in from the dunes. It just seemed happy and fun. and obviously was also attached to one of the most popular leveling zones in the game, Valkyrie Dunes. By contrast, Mauro seemed kind of depressing and awful, all harsh winds and loneliness, and with Selbina being the exact opposite. Maybe that's just me, but man, once I'd escaped into the wider world of Vana'diel from my Windurstian roots, I just realized how much there was still left to see. While hating a zone by contrast isn't really fair, I never really lost that feeling over the years that there was just a way better version of the zone waiting out across the sea. With all the same amenities, but infinitely more charm. When I came back to find Mauro a bit of a hub due to Ambuscade, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little let down. Come on, that could have been Selbina, guys. What are we doing? Now, before we move on, I would like to say that in filming the footage for Mauro, I realized I may have made a mistake. In actually paying attention to the zone in a way I don't think I have in years for this video, I found new appreciation for the flickering lanterns, towering stone arches, and soothing melody that smooths out the edges of this rough landscape. While I stand by everything I just said, it's easy after years of visiting the same places over and over again to lose some of the magic that the developers so carefully infused. But there's no stopping now. I've got to stand by my choice. Mauro is a little bit worse than Selbina in my humble opinion. Moving on to a zone I think we can all agree on though, number 3, the LDM Necropolis. Everyone remembers the first time they entered the Necropolis. Seeing the mounds that mark the entrances strewn across Battaglia Downs, it's a dark, cold looking place I can almost smell the staleness, the underlying rot. It's just so bad. Now imagine that it's also a hellhole of death. Every turn has another 10 enemies waiting to aggro you and ensure your swift demise, because that's exactly what will happen. Obviously, this place was a crypt, and what do you find in crypts? Ghosts, skeletons, various forms of undead, you know, everyone's favorite enemies in Final Fantasy XI. All this wouldn't be a huge deal though if it weren't for the doors. Each hallway ended in a room with 4 exits, only 2 of which were ever open. If your path wasn't open, you had to go a different route and get to the switch to open it. But then the way to get that room from the switch would be barred from you, meaning you could open it for somebody else, but not for yourself. You always had to have a friend with you. It was the worst. It was like the Garledge Citadel, like the steps to open the doors with 4 people, but infinitely more frustrating, because they didn't have to be in the same place. They had to go at different routes. Oh, it was just awful. Like Bedeau, there was no music, just your footsteps echoing throughout the zone, and distant bogeys making that awful bogey noise. You didn't really come here alone. You didn't come here by choice. Ever. You just avoided the zone. It was literally by design one of the most annoying and unhappy zones in the game, and like the cruel assholes they are, Square Enix put many an artifact coffer chest smack in the middle. I camped out the only spot that could be reached alone on Black Mage for a week. You had to go through like Bucetine Glacier. It was the longest roundabout technique to get to one coffer pop. Screw the LDM Necropolis. Leading us to number 2, but what could beat LDM Necropolis, you say? Merfdod Mountains. Now I can see the confusion etched in your faces through the computer. Literally through the internet I can see you guys saying, what the hell, this is nowhere near as bad as the LDM Necropolis. But let me explain. What does anyone actually remember about Merfdod Mountains? If you answered, oh well dude, you have to go through there to get to Castle Astrosia or the Sanctuary of Zeta, then you might see my point. It's a pass-through zone. Nothing happens here. I can't remember any exciting notorious monsters, good camps, or good much of anything in the whole zone. I briefly stopped here for the Dragoon quest, which is kind of exciting, but then promptly left. I never logged out in this zone. I've never remained for any length of time. It's just boring. The giant spine in the center is pretty neat, but can't make up for how annoying it makes travel. Besides the main path, there's usually a valley in the way, or even just those mini ditches that completely cut you off from making a beeline to wherever you're going. There could have been an opportunity to introduce some exciting wildlife, but honestly, Tarangi pulled off the whole desert canyon climate thing way better. There's no music, wind, or sandy dirt earth are the main weather types. It just is. While this may not seem like enough to make it worth a worst zones list, even with just the initial release being what we're covering, it's just important to remember how beautiful the rest of this game can be. As far as equivalent level zones are, it's competing with Pashao Marshlands and Jugner Forest, both lush areas full of interesting creatures, both NM and regular. I've revisited both those zones countless times and enjoyed it. I honestly rather like Pashao Marshlands, but Merfdod Mountains, even the name is ridiculously awful to pronounce. I just don't like it. If you told me tomorrow that Final Fantasy XI was getting an HD remake, everything exactly the same, but Merfdod Mountains was being removed from the game entirely, I would shed no tears. Finally bringing us to number 1. So what zone could be the worst zone in Final Fantasy XI? What zone could evoke such frustration as to top this list? Delphux Tower. Lower, middle, and upper Delphux Tower were full of gigas, goblins, pots, demonic dolls, which as far as enemies go, aren't really the worst. There's no music, but at least it's well lit, so what's the big deal? Why do I hate it so much? It is a labyrinth of frustrating, identical white hallways, rooms, stairs, everything. Everything looks exactly the same. I've been playing this game for like 15 years now, and I still get lost every time I enter. It is teleports between the zones, stairs that only go up halfway, and then you realize you've gotten to the wrong floor, and you gotta go back down, dead ends. Everyone at least once knows the pain of going up the wrong way and realizing you've gotta head back down, loop your way back up a different way to get to where you're actually trying to go. Now, I will say there were some awesome NMs in here. The Palace bracelets, their younger and older brothers, that guy that dropped like 5K for no reason. But there were like 15 maps. This isn't how do I get to map 2 of the Boyata tree? Looking at a website or guide wasn't even all that helpful sometimes because you had to organize all these pages. And yes, some of it was a natural progression of like stairs going up. But if you lost track, shit got just so confusing. There was even an elevator, and somehow I'd still managed to screw that up, ending up on the wrong damn floor, or thinking it could pop me out at a different spot, and then I ended up at the wrong map, but I was reading the map I thought I was on. Look, I know this one may seem ridiculous, but anyone who's made that climb or gotten lost in Delphi Tower, but wandered feeling every second that you'd finally figured it out, and you were gonna make it to where you thought you were going, you just gotta hate this place. I'm not sure if that was its intention by Square Enix. I truly think it was meant to be more of an imposing threat, a sort of dark tower at the end of Quiffham Island, a threatening zone to somewhere in the future house some of Zillar's most terrifying battles. But for me, it was just a huge pain in the ass, and still avoid it wherever possible, despite how much time I've actually spent there. So guys, tell me what you thought of this list. Was I totally off base? Are some of your favorites here? Which did I forget? I'm going to be going through each expansion, going through my top favorites and least favorites. So keep on the lookout for those and other videos in the future. Otherwise, I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, you should totally think about subscribing. I've got videos coming out twice a week, and if you like this one, there's at least a chance you'll like some of the others that are very similar to this, so live dangerously. Let me know what you guys thought about the video in the comments and other videos you'd like to see. And finally, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Huntin for Games to keep up with all the latest stuff. See ya.